Theme 1: Bricks, Beads and Bones, the Harappan Civilization. This is a Harappan seal. The Harappan seal is possibly the most distinctive artifact of the Harappan or Indus Valley civilization. Made of the stone called steatite, seals like this one often contain animal motifs and signs from a script that remains undeciphered. Yet we know a great deal about the lives of the people who lived in the region from what they left behind, their houses, pots, ornaments, tools and seals. In other words, from archaeological evidence, let us see what we know about the Harappan civilization and how we know about it. We will explore how archaeological material is interpreted and how interpretations sometimes change. Of course, there are some aspects of the civilization that are as yet unknown and may even remain so. This is beads, weights and blade. Terms, places, times. The Indus Valley civilization is also called the Harappan culture. Archaeologists use the term culture for a group of objects distinctive in style that are usually folded together within a specific geographical area and period of time. In the case of the Harappan culture, these distinctive objects include seals, beads, weights, stone, blades, and even baked bricks. These objects were found from areas as far apart as Afghanistan, Jammu, Balochistan, Pakistan, and Gujarat. Named after Harappa, the first site where this unique culture was discovered, the civilization is dated between 2600 and 1900 BCE. There were earlier and later cultures, often called Early Harappan and Late Harappan. In the same area, the Harappan civilization is sometimes called the mature Harappan culture to distinguish it from these cultures. You will find certain abbreviations related to dates in the book. BP stands for before presents. BCE stands for before common era. CE stands for common era. The present year is 2015 according to this dating system. C stands for the Latin word circa and means approximate. This is the map 1, some important mature Harappan sites. Sutkangarh, Mohenjo-Daro, Kot Diji, Amri, Balakot, Chanhudro, Dholabira, Nageshwar, Rangpur, Lothal, Mahi, Sabarmati, Narmada, Chambal, Jamuna, Ganga, Manda, Jhilam, Chenab, Ravi, Harappa, Sutlej, Banwali, Rakhigari, Kalibangal, Mitathal, Indus, etc. Beginnings. There are several archaeological cultures in the region prior to the mature Harappan. These cultures were associated with distinctive pottery, evidence of agriculture and pastoralism, and some crafts. Settlements were generally small and there were virtually no large buildings. It appears that there was a break between the early Harappan and the Harappan civilization, evident from large-scale burning at some site as well as the abandonment of certain settlement. Early and mature Harappan culture. Look at this figure for the number of settlements in Sindh and Cholistan, the desert area of Pakistan bordering the Thar Desert. Total number of sites Sindh 106, Cholistan 239. Early Harappan sites Sindh 52, Cholistan 37. Mature Harappan sites Sindh 65, Cholistan 136. Mature Harappan settlements on new sites Sindh 43 and Cholistan 132. Early Harappan sites abandoned Sindh 39 and Cholistan 33. Next, subsistence of strategies. If you look at map 1 and 2, you will notice that the mature Harappan culture developed in some of the areas occupied by the early Harappan culture. This culture also shared certain common elements, including subsistence strategies. The Harappan ate a wide range of plant and animal products, including fish. Archaeologists have been able to reconstruct dietary practice from finds of charred grains and seeds. These are studied by archaeobotanists, who are specialists in ancient plant remains. Grains found at Harappan sites include wheat, barley, lentil, chickpea, and sesame. Millet are found from sites in Gujarat. Find of rice are relatively rare. Animal bones found at Harappan sites include those of cattle, sheep, goat, buffalo, and pig. Studies done by archaeogeologists or zooarchaeologists indicate that these animals were domesticated. Bones of wild species such as boar, deer, and gharial are also found. We do not know whether the Harappan hunted these animals themselves or obtained meat from other hunting communities. Bone of fish and fowl and also found. This is map 2, areas of early Harappan occupation. Arabian Sea, Amri Nal, Dam Sadat, Kor Diji, Indus, Shishul. Agricultural technologies. While the prevalence of agricultural is indicated by finds of grain, it is more difficult to reconstruct actual agricultural practices, where seeds broadcast scattered on plowed lands. Representations on seal and terracotta sculpture indicate that the bull was known, and archaeologists extrapolate from this that oxen were used for plowing. Moreover, terracotta models of the plough have been found at sites in Cholistan and Banwali, Haryana. Archaeologists have also found evidence of the ploughed field and Kalibangan, Rajasthan, associated with early Harappan levels. The field had two sets of furrows at right angles to each other, suggesting that two different crops were grown together. This is a terracotta bull. Archaeologists have also tried to identify the tools used for harvesting. Did the Harappans use stone blades set in wooden handles, or did they use metal tools? Most Harappan sites are located in semi-arid lands where irrigation was probably required for agriculture. Traces of canals have been found at the Harappan site of Shortughai in Afghanistan, but not in Punjab or Sindh. It is possible that ancient canals silted up long ago. It is also likely that water drawn from wells was used for irrigation. Besides, water reservoirs found in Dholavira, Gujarat, may have been used to store water for agriculture. Next we discuss, are there any similarities or differences in the distribution of settlement shown on map 1 and 2? Please comment it. This is copper tools. Do you think these tools could have been used for harvesting? Comment this. This is reservoir at Dholavira. Note the masonry work. How artifacts are identified. Processing of food required grinding equipment as well as vessels of mixing, blending and cooking. These were made of stone, metal and terracotta. This is an excerpt from one of the earliest reports on excavation in Mohenjo-Daro, the best known Harappan site. Saddle querns are found in considerable number and then seem to have been the only means in use for grinding cereals. As a rule, they were roughly made of hard, gritty, igneous rock or sandstone and mostly shown signs of hard uses, as their bases are usually convex. They must have been set in the earth or in mud to prevent their rocking. Two main types have been found, those on which another smaller stone was pushed or rolled to and fro, and other with which a second stone was used as a pounder, eventually making a large cavity in the neither stone. Querns of the former type were probably used solely for grain. The second type possibly only for pounding herbs and spices for making curries. In fact, stone of this latter type are dubbed curry stone by our workmen, and our cook asked for the loan of one from the museum for use in the kitchen. From Ernest Mackay, further excavation at Mohenjo-Daro 1937. This is saddle quern. Archaeologists use present-day analogies to try and understand that what ancient artifacts were used for. Mackay was comparing present-day quern with what he found. Is this a useful strategy? Comment this. Discuss what is the evidence used by archaeologists to reconstruct dietary practice. Comment this. Next, Mohenjo-Daro, a planned urban center. Perhaps the most unique feature of the Harappan civilization was the development of urban centers. Let us look at one such center, Mohenjo-Daro, more closely. Although Mohenjo-Daro is the most well-known site, the first site to be discovered was Harappa. The settlement is divided into two sections, one smaller but higher and the other much larger. But lower. Archaeologists designated this as the citadel and the lower town respectively. The citadel owes its height to the fact that buildings were constructed on mud brick platform. It was walled, which means that it was physically separated from the lower town. The lower town was also walled. Several buildings were built on platform which served as foundation. It has been calculated that if one laborer moved roughly a cubic meter of earth daily just to put the foundation in place, it would have required 4 million persons a day. In other words, mobilizing labor on a very large scale. Layout of Mohenjo-Daro. This is lower town. The citadel. Site 2, SD area, RAM area, L area, SEC area. Site 3, DKG northern section, DKG southern section, jewelry, Frenchy block, DKC area, DKB area, DKA area, VSA area, VSB area, Monid area, HRB area, GFD area, HRA area. Consider something else. Once the platform were in place, all building activity within the city was restricted to a fixed area on the platform. So it seems that the settlement was first planned and then implemented accordingly. Other signs of planning include bricks, which, whether sun-dried or baked, were of a standardized ratio where the length and breadth were 4 times and twice the height respectively. Such bricks were used at all Harappan settlement. The plight of Harappa. Although Harappa was the first site to be discovered, it was badly destroyed by brick robbers. As early as 1875, Alexander Cunningham, the first Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India (ASI), often called the father of Indian archaeology, noted that the amount of brick taken from the ancient site was enough to lay bricks for about 100 miles. For the railway lies between Lahore and Multan. Thus many of the ancient structures at the site were damaged. In contrast, Mohenjo-Daro was far better preserved. A drain in Mohenjo-Daro. Notice the huge opening of the drain. Laying out drains. One of the most distinctive features of Harappan cities was the carefully planned drainage system. If you look at the plan of the lower town, you will notice that roads and streets are laid out along an approximate grid pattern, intersecting at right angles. It seems that streets with drains were laid out first, then houses built along them. If domestic wastewater had to flow into the street drains, every house needed to have at least one well along a street. Citadels. While most Harappan settlements have a small high western part and larger lower eastern section, there are variations. At sites such as Dholavira and Lothal, Gujarat, the entire settlement was fortified and sections within the town were also separated by walls. The citadel within Lothal was not walled up but was built at a height. The most ancient system yet discovered. About the drains, Mackay noted it is certainly the most complete ancient system as yet discovered. Every house was connected to the street drains. The main channel was made of bricks set in mortar and were covered with loose bricks that could be removed for cleaning. In some cases, limestone was used for the cover. House drains first emptied into a sump of cesspit into which solid matter settled while wastewater flowed out into the street drain. Very long drainage channels were provided at intervals with sump of cleaning. It is a wonder of archaeology that little heap of material, mostly sand, have frequently been found lying alongside drainage channel, which shows that the debris was not always skirted away when the drain was cleared from Ernest Mackay, early in the Civilization 1948. Drainage system was not unique to the larger cities, but were found in smaller settlements as well. At Lothal, for example, while houses were built of mud brick, drains were made of burnt bricks. Domestic architecture. The lower town at Mohenjo-Daro provides example of residential buildings. Many were centered on a courtyard with rooms on all sides. The courtyard was probably the center of activities such as cooking and weaving, particularly during hot and dry weather. What is also interesting is an apparent concern of privacy. There are no windows in the walls along the ground level. Besides, the main entrance does not give a direct view of the interior of the courtyard. Every house had its own bathroom paved with bricks, with drains connected through the wall to the street drain. Some houses have remains of staircases. To reach a secondary story on the roof, many houses had wells, often in a room that could be reached from the outside and perhaps used by passers-by. Scholars have estimated that the total numbers of wells in Mohenjo-Daro was about 700. This is an isometric drawing of a large house in Mohenjo-Daro. There was a well in room number 6. Where is the courtyard? Comment this. Where are the 2 staircases? Comment this. Where is the entrance to the house like? Comment this. This is the plan of the citadel. The citadel, side 2, great courtyard, Marcel deep trench, and stupa area. The college, the block 6, the Wheelers deep trench, warehouse, great bath, main street, Davis street, eastern retaining wall, southern section, Johnson excavated well, Dixit stage F, stairs, L area, retaining walls, period hall, retaining walls, SEC area. It is on the citadel that we find evidence, the citadel, of structures that were probably used for special public purposes. This includes the warehouse, a massive structure of which the lower brick portion remains, while the upper portion, probably of wood, decayed long ago, and the Great Bath. The Great Bath was a large rectangular tank in a courtyard surrounded by a corridor on all 4 sides. There were 2 flights of steps on the north and south leading into the tank, which was made watertight by setting bricks on edge and using a mortar of gypsum. There are rooms on 3 sides, in one of which was a large well. Water from the tank flowed into a huge drain across a lane. To the north lay a smaller building with 8 bathrooms, 4 on each side of the corridor, with drain from each bathroom connected to a drain that ran along the corridor. The uniqueness of the structure, as well as the context in which it was found, the citadel with several distinctive buildings, has led scholars to suggest that it was meant for some kind of a special ritual bath. Next, discuss which of the archaeological features of Mohenjo-Daro indicate planning. Comment this. And next, are there other structures on the citadel apart from the warehouse and the great bath? Comment this. Next, tracking social difference. Burials. This is a copper mirror. Archaeologists generally use certain strategies to find out whether there were social or economic differences among people living within a particular culture. This includes studying burials. You are probably familiar with the massive pyramids of Egypt, some of which were contemporaneous with the Harappan civilization. Many of these pyramids were royal burials, where enormous quantities of wealth was buried. At burials in Harappan sites, the dead were generally laid in pits. Sometimes there were differences in the way the burial pits was made. In some instances, the hollowed out spaces were lined with bricks. Could this variation be an indication of social differences? We are not sure. Some graves contain pottery and ornaments, perhaps indicating a belief that this could be used in the afterlife. Jewelry has been found in burials of both men and women. In fact, in the excavation at the cemetery in Harappa in the mid-1980s, an ornament consisting of 3 shells rings, a jasper, a kind of semi-precious stone, bead and hundreds of microbeads was found near the skull of a female. In some instances, the dead were buried with copper mirrors. But on the whole, it appears that the Harappan did not believe in burying precious things with the dead. This is a faint spot. Looking for luxuries. Another strategy to identify social differences is to study artifacts which archaeologists broadly classify as utilitarian and luxurious. The first category includes objects of daily use made fairly easily out of ordinarily materials such as stone or clay. This includes querns, pottery, needles, place rubbers, body scrubber, etc., and are usually found distributed throughout settlement. Archaeologists assume objects were luxury if they are rare or made from costly, non-local materials or with complicated technologies. The little pots of fence, a material made of ground sand or silica mixed with color and a gum and then fired, were probably considered precious because they were difficult to make. The situation becomes more complicated when we find what seem to be articles of daily use such as spindle holes made of rare materials such as fence. Do you classify these as utilitarian or luxuries? If we study the distribution of such artifacts, we find that rare objects made of valuable materials are generally concentrated in large settlements like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, are rarely found in the smaller settlements. For example, miniature pots of fence, perhaps used as perfume bottles, are found mostly in Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, and there are none from small settlements like Kalibangan. Gold too was rare, and at the present, probably precious. All the gold jewelry found at Harappan sites were recovered from hoards. Hoards are objects kept carefully by people, often inside containers such as pots. Such hoards can be of jewelry or metal objects, save for refuse, reused by metal workers. If for some reason the original owners do not retrieve them, they remain where they are left till some archaeologists find them. Next, discuss what are the modes of disposal of the dead prevalent at present. To what extent do these represent social differences? Comment this. Finding out about crab production. Locate Chanhudro on map 1. This is a tiny settlement less than 7 hectares as compared to Mohenjo-Daro 125 hectares, almost exclusively devoted to craft production, including bead making, shell cutting, metal working, seal making, and wet making. The variety of material used to make beads is remarkable. Stones like carnelian of a beautiful red color, jasper, crystal, quartz, and such steatite. Metals like copper, bronze, and gold, and shell, fence, and terracotta or burnt clay. Some beads are made of 2 or more stones, cemented together, some of stone with gold caps. The shapes were numerous: disc-shaped, cylindrical, spherical, barrel-shaped, segmented. Some are decorated by incising or painting, and some had design aids onto them. This is a tool and beads. Techniques for making beads differ according to the materials. Steatite, a very soft stone, was easily worked. Some beads are molded out of a plast made with steatite powder. This permitted making a variety of shapes, unlike the geometrical forms made out of harder stones. How the steatite microbeads was made remains a puzzle for archaeologists studying ancient technology. Archaeological experiments have revealed that the red color of carnelian was obtained by firing the yellowish raw material and beads at various stages of production. Nodules were chipped into rough shaped and then finely flaked into the final form. Grinding, polishing, and drilling completed the process. Specialized drills have been found at Chanhudro, Lothal and more recently at Dholavira. If you locate Nageshwar and Balakot on map 1, you will notice that both settlements are near the coast. These were specialized centers for making sail objects, including bangles, ladders, and inlay, which were taken to other settlements. Similarly, it is likely that finished products such as beads from Chanudro and Lothal was taken to the large urban centers such as Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. This is pottery. Some of these can be seen in the National Museum, Delhi, or in the Site Museum at Lothal. This is a terracotta figurine. Identifying centers of production. In order to identify centers of craft production, archaeologists usually look for the following raw materials such as stone, nodules, wholesale, copper ore, tools, unfinished objects, rejects, and waste material. In fact, waste is one of the best indicators of craft work. For instance, if sail or stone is cut to make object, then pieces of this material will be discarded as waste at the place of production. Next, discuss, should the stone artifacts illustrated in the chapter be considered as utilitarian objects or luxuries? Are there any that may fall into both categories? Comment this. Sometimes larger waste pieces were used up to make smaller objects, but minuscule bits were usually left in the work area. These traces suggest that apart from small, specialized centered craft production was also undertaken in large cities such as Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. This is copper and bronze vessels. Strategies for procuring materials. As is obvious, a variety of materials were used for craft production, while some such as clay were locally available. Many such as stones, timber, and metal had to be procured from outside the alluvial plain. Terracotta toy models of block cars suggest that this was one important means of transporting goods and people across land routes, riverine routes along the Indus and its tributaries, as well as coastal routes were also probably used. Next, materials from the subcontinent and beyond. The Harappan procured materials for craft production in various ways. For instance, they established settlements such as Nageshwar and Balakot in areas where sail was available. Other such cities were Shortughai in far of Afghanistan near the best source of lapis lazuli, a blue stone that was apparently very highly valued, and Lothal, which was near sources of carnelian from Baranch in Gujarat, steatite from South Rajasthan and North Gujarat, and metal from Rajasthan. Another strategy for procuring raw materials may have been to send expeditions to areas such as the Khetru region of Rajasthan for copper and South India for gold. This expedition established communication with local communities. Occasional find of Harappan artifacts such as steatite microbeads in these areas are indications of such contacts. There is evidence in the Khetri area for what archaeologists call the Ganeshwar Jodhpura culture, with its distinctive non-Harappan pottery and an unusual wealth of copper objects. It is possible that the inhabitants of this region supplied copper to the Harappans. This is map 3, the Harappan civilization and the West Asia. Mediterranean Sea, Mesopotamia, Uruk, Ur, Caspian Sea, Altai Depi, Turan, Sari Sokta, Tepiyayi, Dilmun, Harappa, Meluha, Suktagandar, Magan, Red Sea, Russell Janiaj, Arabian Sea, Lothal. etc. This is a Harappan jar found in Oman. Next, contact with distant land. Recent archaeological finds suggest that copper was also probably brought from Oman on the southeastern tip of Arabian Peninsula. Chemical analysis have shown that both the Omani copper and Harappan artifacts have traces of nickel, suggesting a common origin. There are other traces of contact as well. A distinctive type of vessel, a large Harappan jar coated with a thick layer of black clay, has been found at Omani sites. Such thick coating prevents the percolation of liquid. We do not know what was carried in these vessels, but it is possible that the Harappan exchanged the contents of this vessel for Omani copper. Mesopotamian texts datable to the 3rd millennium BCE refer to copper coming from a region called Magan, perhaps a name for Oman, and interestingly enough copper found at Mesopotamian sites also contain traces of nickel. Other archaeological finds suggestive of long distant contact, including Harappan seals, weight, dice, and beads. In this context, it is worth nothing that Mesopotamian texts mention contract with region named Dilman, probably the isolation of Bahrain, Magan, and Meluha, possibly the Harappan region. They mention the product from Meluha, carnelian. Lapis lazuli, copper, gold, and variety of wood. A Mesopotamian myth says of Meluha, may your bird be the Haja bird, may its call be heard in the royal palace. Some archaeologists think the Haja bird was a peacock. Did it get this name from its call? It is likely that communication with Oman, Bahrain, or Mesopotamia was by sea. Mesopotamian texts refer to Meluha was as a land of seafarers. Besides, we find depiction of ships and boats on seals. This is a cylinder seal typical of Mesopotamia, but the ham bull motif on it appears to be derived from the Indus region. This is the round Persian Gulf seal found. The Bahrain sometimes carries Harappan motifs. Interestingly, local Dilmun weights followed the Harappan standard. This is the seal depicting a boat. Discuss what were the possible routes from the Harappan region to Oman, Dilmun, and Mesopotamia. Comment this. This is the letter on an ancient signboard. Next, seal script weights. A sealing from Roper. How many seals are impressed on this piece of clay? Comment this. Seals and sealing. Seals and sealing were used to facilitate a long-distance communication. Imagine a bag of goods being sent from one place to another. Its mouth was tied with rope, and on the knot was affixed some wet clay on which one or more seals were pressed, leaving an impression. If the bag reached with its sealing intact, it meant that it had not been tampered with. The sealing also conveyed the identity of the sender. An enigmatic script. Harappan seals usually has a line of writing, probably containing the name and title of the owner. Scholars have also suggested that the motif, generally an animal, conveyed a meaning to those who could not read. Most inscriptions are short, and the longest containing about 26 signs, although the script remains undeciphered to date. It was evidently non-alphabetical, where each sign stands for a vowel or consonant. As it has just too many signs, somewhere between 375 to 400, it is apparent that the script was written from right to left, as some seals show wider spacing on the right and cramping on the left, as if the engraver began working from the right and then ran out of space. Consider the variety of objects on which writing has been found: seals, copper, tools, rims of jar, copper and terracotta tablets, jewelry, bones, rods, even an ancient signboard. Remember, there may have been writing on perishable materials too. Could this mean that literacy was widespread? Next, discuss what are some of the present day methods used for long distance exchange of goods. What are their advantages and problems? Comment this. Next, weights. Exchanges were regulated by a precise system of weights, usually made of a stone called chert and generally cubical, with no marking. The lower denominations of weights were binary: 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, etc., up to 12,800. While the higher denomination followed the decimal system, the smaller weights are probably used for weighting jewelry and beads. Metal scale pans have also been found. This is a priest king. Ancient authority. There are indications of complex discussion being taken up implemented in Harappan society. Take, for instance, the extraordinary uniformity of Harappan artifacts as evident in pottery, seals, weights, and bricks, notably bricks, though obviously not produced in any single center, were of a uniform ratio throughout the region. From Jammu to Gujarat, we have also seen the settlement were strategically set up the specific location for various reasons. Besides, labor was mobilized for making bricks and for the construction of massive well and platform. Who organized these activities? Next, palaces and kings. If we look for a center of power for depiction of people in power, archaeological records provide no immediate answer. A large building found at Mohenjo-Daro was labeled as a palace by archaeologists, but no spectacular finds were associated with it. A stone statue was labeled and continues to be known as priest king. This is because archaeologists were familiar with Mesopotamian history and its priest king and have found parallels in the Indus region. But as we will see, the ritual practice of the Harappan civilization are not well understood, yet nor are there any means of knowing whether those who perform them also held political power. Some archaeologists are of the opinion that Harappan society had no rulers and that everybody enjoyed equal status. Others feel there was no single ruler but several. The Mohenjo-Daro had a separate ruler and Harappa another, and so forth. Yet others argue that there was a single state. Given the similarity in artifacts, the evidence for planned settlement, the standardized ratio of brick size, and establishment of settlement near source of raw materials as of now, the last theory seems the most plausible, and it is unlikely that entire communities could be collectively made and implemented such complex decisions. Next, discuss, could everybody in Harappan society have been equal? Comment this. Next, the end of the civilization. There is evidence that by 18,000 BC, most of the mature Harappan sites in regions such as Cholistan had been abandoned. Simultaneously, there was an expansion of population into new settlements in Gujarat, Haryana, and western Uttar Pradesh. This is map 4, areas of late Harappan occupation. Swat, Indus, Cemetery, late Sissul, Jhukar, Rangpur 2 BC, Arabian Sea. In the few Harappan sites that continued to be occupied after 1900 BC, there appears to have been a transformation of material culture, marked by the disappearance of the distinctive artifacts of the civilization where sails, special beds, writing long-distance trade, and craft specialization also disappeared. In general, far fewer materials were used to make far fewer things, how whose construction techniques deteriorated and large public structures were no longer produced. Overall, artifacts and settlements indicate a rural way of life in what are called late Harappan or successor culture. What brought about these changes? Several explanations have been put forward. This range from climatic change, deforestation, excessive floods, and shifting and or dying up of rivers, the overuse of the landscape. Some of these causes may hold for certain settlements, but they do not explain the collapse of the entire civilization. It appears that a strong unifying elements part of the Harappan state come to an end. This is evidenced by the disappearance of seals, the script, distinctive beads, and pottery. The shift from a standardized weight system to the use of local weights and the decline and abandon of cities, the subcontinent would have to wait for over a millennium for new cities to develop in a completely different region. Next, evidence of a invention. Dead Man Lane is a narrow alley varying from 3 to 6 feet in width. At the point where the lane turned westward, part of the skull and the bones of the thorax and upper arm of the adult are discovered, all in very fragile condition. At a depth of 4 feet 2 inches, the body lay on its back diagonally across the lane. The 15 inches to the west were a few fragments of a tiny skull. It is to this remains that the lane owes its name, from John Marshall, Mohenjo-Daro and the Indus Civilization, 1931. 16 skeletons of people with the ornaments that they were wearing when they died were found from the same part of Mohenjo-Daro in 1925. Much later, in 1947, R.E.M. Wheeler, the Director General of ASI, tried to correlate this archaeological evidence with that of the Rig Veda, the earliest known text in the subcontinent. He wrote, "The Rig Veda mentions Pur, meaning rampart, fort or stronghold. Indra, the Aryan war god, is called Puramdara, the fort destroyer. Where or where these citadels? It has the past been supposed that they were mythical. The recent excavation of Harappa may be thought to have changed in picture. Here we have a highly evolved civilization of essentially non-Aryan type, now known to have employed massive fortification, what destroyed the firmly settled civilization. Climatic, economic, or political deterioration may have weakened it, but its ultimate extinction is more likely to have been completed by deliberate and large-scale destruction. It may be no mere chance that at a late period of men, women, and children appear to have been massacred there. On circumstantial evidence, Indra stands accused. From R.E.M. Wheeler, Harappa 1946, Ancient India 1947. In the 1960s, the evidence of a massacre in Mohenjo-Daro was questioned by an archaeologist named George Dells. He demonstrated that the skeletons found at the site did not belong to the same period, whereas a couple of them definitely seemed to indicate a skeleton. The bulk of the bones were found in context, suggesting burials of sloppiest and most irregular nature. There is no destruction level covering the latest period of the city, no sign of extensive burning, no bodies of warriors clad in armor and surrounded by the weapons of war. The citadel, the only fortified part of the city, yielded no evidence of a final defense. From G. F. Dells, The Mythical Massacre at Mohenjo-Daro Expedition, 1964. As you can see, a careful re-examination of the data can sometimes lead to a reversal of earlier interpretations. Discuss what are the similarities and differences between map 1, 2 and 4. Comment this. Next, discovering the Harappan civilization. So far, we have examined facts of the Harappan civilization in the context of how archaeologists have used evidence from material remains to piece together parts of fascinating history. However, there is another story as well about how archaeologists discovered the civilization. When Harappan citizens fell into ruin, people gradually forgot all about them. When men and women began living in the area millennia later, they did not know what to make of the strange artifact that occasionally surfaced, washed by floods or exposed by soil erosion, or turned up while plowing a field or digging for treasure. Next, Cunningham's confession. When Cunningham, the first Director General of the ASI, began archaeological excavation in the mid-19th century, archaeologists preferred to use the written word, text and inscription as a guide to investigation. In fact, Cunningham's main interest was in the archaeology of the early history 6th century BC, 4th century CE, and later periods. He used the accounts left by Chinese Buddhist pilgrims who had visited the subcontinent between the 4th and 7th century CE to locate early settlements. Cunningham also collected, documented and translated inscriptions found during his survey. When he excavated sites, he tended to recover artifacts that he thought had cultural value. Cunningham's sketch of the first known seal from Harappa. A site like Harappa, which was not part of the itinerary of the Chinese pilgrim and was not known as early historic city, did not fit very neatly within his framework of investigation. So, although Harappan artifacts were found fairly often during the 19th century and some of these reached Cunningham, he did not realize how old these were. A Harappan seal was given to Cunningham by an Englishman. He noted the object but unsuccessfully tried to place it within the time frame with which he was familiar. This was because he, like many others, thought that Indian history began with the first cities in the Ganga Valley. Given his specific focus, it is not surprising that he missed the significance of Harappa. Sites, mounds, layers. Archaeological sites are formed through the production, use, the discarding of materials and structure when people continue to live in the same place. Their constant use and use of the landscape result in the build of the occupational debris called a mound. Brief off or permanent abandonment result in alteration of the landscape by wind or water, activity and erosion. Occupation are detected by traces of ancient material found in layer which differ from one another in color, texture and artifacts that are found in them. Abandonment or desertion, what are called sterile layers, can be identified by the absence of such traces. Generally, the lowest layer are the oldest and the highest are the most recent. The study of those layers is called stratigraphy. Artifacts found in layers can be assigned to specific cultural periods and can thus provide the cultural sequence for a site. This is the stratigraphy of a small mound. Notice that the layers are not exactly horizontal. A new old civilization. Subsequently, seals were discovered at Harappan by archaeologists such as Dayaram Shahani in the early decades of 20th century in layers that were definitely much older than early historic level. It was then that their significance began to be realized. Another archaeologist, Rakhaldas Banerjee, found similar seals of Mohenjo-Daro, leading to the concur that these sites are part of a single archaeological culture based on this find in 1924. John Marshall, Director General of the ASI, announced the discovery of a new civilization in the Indus Valley to the world as S.N. Roy noted in The Story of Indian Archaeology. Marshall left India 3000 years older than he had found her. This was because similar till then unidentified seals were found at excavations as Mesopotamian sites. It was then that the world knew not only of a new civilization but also of one contemporaneous with Mesopotamia. In fact, John Marshall's stint as Director General of the ASI marked a major change in India archaeology. He was the first professional archaeologist to work in India and brought his experience of working in Greece and Crete to the field. More important, though, like Cunningham, he too was interested in spectacular finds. He was equally keen to look for pattern of everyday life. Marshall tended to excavating along regular horizontal units measured uniformly throughout the mound, ignoring the stratigraphy of the site. This meant that all the artifacts recovered from the same unit were grouped together, even if they were found at different stratigraphic layers, as a result valuable information about the context of these finds are invariably lost. Wheeler at Harappa. Early archaeologists were often driven by a sense of adventure. This is what Wheeler wrote about his experience at Harappa. It was, I recall, on a warm May night in 1944 that a 4-mile Tonga ride brought me as the newly appointed Director General of the Archaeological Survey with my local Muslim officer from a little railway station labeled Harappa along a deep sand track to a small rest house beside the moonlit mound of the ancient site, warned by my anxious colleague that we must start it. Our inspection at 5:30 next morning and finish by 7:30, after which it would be too hot. We turned in with the dark figure of a punkawalla crouched patiently in the entrance and the night air ran by innumerable jackals in the neighboring wilderness. Next morning, punctually at 5:30, our little procession started out toward the sandy heaps. Within 10 minutes, I stopped and rubbed my eyes. I gazed upon the tallest mound, scarcely trusting my vision. 6 hours later, my embrace stove and I was still toiling with picks and knives under the blazing sun. The mad Sahib, I am afraid, setting a relentless pace. From R.E.M. Wheeler, My Archaeological Mission to India and Pakistan, 1976. Next, new technique and questions. It was R.E.M. Wheeler, after he took over as Director General of ASI in 1944, who rectified this problem. Wheeler recognized that it was necessary to follow the stratigraphy of the mound rather than dig mechanically along uniform horizontal lines. Moreover, as an ex-army brigadier, he brought with him a military precision to the practice of archaeology. The frontiers of the Harappan civilization have little or no connection with present-day national boundaries. However, with the partition of the subcontinent and the creation of Pakistan, the major sites are now in Pakistani territory. This has spurred Indian archaeologists to try and locate sites in India. An extensive survey in Kutch has revealed a number of Harappan settlements and exploration in Punjab and Haryana have added to the list of Harappan sites, while Kalibangan, Lothal, Rakhigadi, and most recently Dholavira have been discovered, explored, and excavated as part of this effort. Fresh exploration continues. Over the decades, new issues have assumed importance, where some archaeologists are often keen to obtain a cultural sequence. Others try to understand the logic underlying the location of artifacts, trying to figure out the function this may have served. Since the 1980s, there has also been growing international interest in Harappan archaeology. Specialists from the subcontinent and abroad have been jointly working at both Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. They are using modern scientific techniques including surface and exploration to recover traces of clay, stone, metal, and plant and animal remains, as well as to minutely analyze every scrap of available evidence. This exploration promises to yield interesting results in the future. Next, discuss which of the themes in this chapter would have interested Cunningham. Which are the issues that have been of interest since 1947? Comment this. Next, problem of piecing together the past. As we have seen, it is not the Harappan script that help in understanding the ancient civilization, rather it is material evidence that allows archaeologists to better reconstruct Harappan life. The material could be pottery, tools, ornaments, household objects, etc. Organic materials such as clothes, leather, wood, and reeds generally decompose, especially in tropical regions. What survives of stone, burnt clay, or terracotta, metal, etc. It is also important to remember that only broken or useless objects would have been thrown away, other things would probably have been recycled. Consequently, valuable artifacts that are found intact were either lost in the past or hoarded and never retrieved. In other words, such finds are accidental rather than typical. Next, classifying finds. Recovering artifacts is just the beginning of the archaeological enterprise. Archaeologists then classify their find. One simple principle of classification is in terms of material such as stone, clay, metal, bone, ivory, etc. The second and more complicated it is term of function. Archaeologists have to decide whether, for instance, an artifact is a tool or an ornament, or both, or something meant for ritual use. In understanding of the function of an artifact is often shaped by its resemblance with present-day things. Beads, coins, stone, blades, and pots are obvious examples. Archaeologists also try to identify the function of an artifact by investigating the context in which it was found. Was it found in a house, in a drain, in a grave, in a kiln? Sometimes archaeologists have to take recourse to indirect evidence. For instance, though there are traces of cotton of some Harappan site, to find out about clothing, we have to depend on indirect evidence, including depiction in sculpture. Archaeologists have to develop frames of reference. We have seen that the first Harappan seal that was found could not be understood till archaeologists had a context in which to place it, both in terms of the cultural sequence in which it was found and in terms of a comparison with finds in Mesopotamia. This was a mother goddess. And a proto-Shiva seal. Next, problems of interpretation. The problems of archaeological interpretation are perhaps most evident in attempt to reconstruct religious practice. Early archaeologists thought that certain objects which seemed unusual or unfamiliar may have had a religious significance. This included terracotta figurine of women, heavily jeweled, some with elaborate headdresses. These were regarded as mother goddess rare stone statuary of men in an almost standardized posture, seated with one hand on the knee, such as the priest king, was also similarly classified. In other instances, structure have been assigned ritual significance. These include the great bath and fire altars found at Kalibangan and Lothal. Attempts have also been made to reconstruct religious beliefs and practices by examining seals, some of which seem to depict ritual scene, others with plant motif are thought to indicate nature or worship. Some animals, such as a one-horned animal often called the unicorn, depicted on seals seem to be mythical, composite creatures. In some seals, a figure shown seated, cross-legged in a yogic posture, sometimes surrounded by animals, has been regarded as a depiction of Proto-Shiva. That is, an early form of one of the major deities of Hinduism. Besides conical stone objects have been classified as lingas. Many reconstructions Harappan religion are made of the assumption that later tradition provides parallel with earlier ones. This is because archaeologists often move from the known to the unknown. This is from the present to the past. While this is valuable in the cause of stone quads and port, it becomes more speculative when we extend it to religious symbols. Let us look, for instance, at the Proto-Shiva seals. The earliest religious text, the Rig Veda, compiled 1500 to 1000 BC, mentioned a god named Rudra, which is a name used for Shiva in later Puranic tradition in 1st millennium CE. However, unlike Shiva, Rudra in the Rig Veda is neither depicted as Pashupati, lord of animals in general and cattle in particular, nor as a yogi. In other words, this depiction does not match the description of Rudra in the Rig Veda. In this, then, possibly a shaman, as some scholars have suggested. A linga is a polished stone that is worshipped as a symbol of Shiva. Shamans are men and women who claim magical and healing power, as well as an ability to communicate with the other world. This is gemsmen or lingers. This is what Mackey, one of the earliest excavators, had to say about this stone. Various small cones made of lapis lazuli, jasper, chalcedony, and other stones, most beautiful cut and finished and less than 2 inches in height, are also thought to be lingas. On the other hand, it is just as possible that they were used in the board games from Ernest Mackey early in the Civilization 1948. This is a terracotta cart. What has been achieved after so many decades of archaeological work? We have a fairly good idea of the Harappan economy. We have been able to tease out social differences, and we have some idea of how the civilization functions. It is really not clear how much more we would know if the script were to be deciphered. If a bilingual inscription is found, question about the language spoken by the Harappan could perhaps be put to rest. Several reconstructions remain speculative. At present, was the Great Bath a ritual structure? How widespread was literacy? Why do Harappan cemeteries show little social differentiation? Also unanswered are questions on gender. Did women make pottery, or did they only paint pots as at present? What about other craftspersons? What were the terracotta female figurines used for? Very few scholars have investigated the issue of gender in the context of the Harappan civilization, and this is a whole new area for future work. Discuss what are the aspects of Harappan economy that have been reconstructed from archaeological evidence? Comment this. Timeline 1. The major periods in early Indian archaeology. 2 million BP means before presence, lower Paleolithic. 8,000, this is middle Paleolithic. 35,000 upper Paleolithic. 12,000 Mesolithic. 10,000 Neolithic, early agriculturist and pastoralist. 6,000 Chalcolithic, first use of copper. Harappan civilization 2600 BCE. 1000 BC early iron megalithic burials. 600 BC to 400 CE early historic. Note. All dates are approximate besides there are wide variation in developments in different parts of the subcontinent. Dates indicated are for the earliest evidence of each phase. Timeline 2. Major developments in Harappan archaeology. 19th century, 1875, report of Alexander Cunningham on Harappan sill. 20th century, 1921, M.S. Bhatt's begins excavation at Harappa. 1925, excavation begins at Mohenjo-Daro. 1946, R.E.M. Wheeler excavates at Harappa. 1955, S.R. Rao begins excavation at Lothal. 1960, B.B. Lal and B.K. Thapar begin excavation at Kalibangan. 1974, Mr. Mughal begins exploration in Bawalpur. 1980, a team of German and Italian archaeologists begins surface exploration at Mohenjo-Daro. 1986, American team begins excavation at Harappa. 1990, R.S. Bist begins excavation at Dholavira. This is a Harappan burial.